In this segment, we're going to take a look at employment law and how COVID is presenting big challenges for both the companies and the workers as things start to open up and people are heading back to the offices. The Wall Street Journal spoke with the owner of a restaurant in New York who says that he won't hire people unless they're fully inoculated. The Journal also reporting that one of the biggest hospital groups in Houston is mandating vaccines for both existing workers and new hires. You don't comply, you'll be suspended without pay, then terminated if you still don't get the shot. Then there's a private school in Miami that's taking the exact opposite approach. It's telling teachers that they have to stay away from students if they've gotten the shot because the school is afraid that vaccinated people would, quote, negatively impact those who have not been inoculated. You got to help me out with that one. School also saying that teachers who get the shot over the summer won't be welcomed back for the fall semester. They're concerned that the vaccine is too new to be safe and they want more time before they can accept it in their classrooms. Of course, they're completely wrong here, and thank God an outlier. The vaccine was tested both during trials and then been given to tens of millions of Americans. It's proving to be unbelievably effective and safe. Okay. Take out that wackadoo school in Miami, guys. How clear, Jimmy, is employment law in terms of private companies saying it's in my best interest, both for the employees that work here and then also for customers coming through our door to know that I've gotten people that have gotten 2 shots in their arm?
So it is an untested situation. There's no law prohibiting it. Prohibiting employers from requiring vaccines, at least not as yet. But one of the complications here is how far employers need to go in ascertaining why people are refusing to take the vaccine. There are certain reasons that people may have for taking it that you cannot prohibit them from employment. You can't fire them if they don't want to take the vaccine, for example, for religious purposes or for purposes that don't necessarily relate to health. So my understanding from attorneys with whom I've consulted on this before the show is that while there's no direct prohibition, there's a difference between refusing to hire somebody, perhaps, and firing people that are already under your employ. But there are certain questions that employers may be required to ask in terms of the reasons for not taking the vaccine before not hiring or before terminating the employment of somebody because they don't want to take the vaccine. But it is unsettled, and we'll be hearing a lot about it going through the court system in the next year.
Mayo, does the job matter in terms of what you can and can't do? A public or a private company, or let's say a company that's in public transportation, somebody working on an airline. Is there a distinction with the difference who can and can't mandate getting a shot?
I believe that there is, and I think that if you are in a career that requires you to have direct contact with people who may be at risk, whether it's teaching, whether it's being in the medical profession, or as a carrier, would you work on public transportation, that if you are likely to expose people to an increased risk, then the state itself may have a compelling public health reason to compel you to be vaccinated. And you bring up a good point. If you are an employee at will, you have much fewer protections than you do if you're a union employee. And again, it depends largely on what you do. So quite often we don't have a right to employment. You know, most of us are employed at the will, at the pleasure of the employer. So the employer can tell you that they require the vaccine. You may have a religious exemption, you may have a medical exemption, but it still doesn't mean that you have a necessary right to that job. And if you think about it, right now we're talking about COVID, which is very bad. Look at what's happening in India, certainly, and what's happened in the United States already. But let's imagine instead if we were talking about Ebola. Are we still having this same conversation when it would burn through a village in a week and there'd be nobody left? So we have to be able to allow the government to have a reasoned and measured response, which may allow employers to mandate vaccines.
Jimmy, finally, I know, and you guys probably know as well, companies that are saying, listen, you want to get paid, forget about vaccinated or not, you got to come in the office. Now, a lot of people over the past year have been working remotely. Some argue they can do their job just as well. But is it up to the employer to decide if he's or she's, writing the check, that they have a right to require that somebody be in person if they want to collect?
Well, let's go a step further. Not only require that they have to come back to the office, but also require that they have to be vaccinated. Again, I think that I agree with Mayo entirely, but I do think that a lot of different lines are going to be drawn here. I do think that where you work, what your contact is with the general public. If you have a job, you're being required to go back in the office, but you have your own office, you're socially distanced, and so on and so forth. All of these factors come into consideration. And quite frankly, when you start getting challenges in the courts, it's really going to be a difficult task for courts to be able to draw those lines if, in fact, they're willing to do so, or if what they say is as Mayo said, you're an employee at will, and unless you have a constitutional or unless you have a viable claim that's actionable in court as to why you can't be forced to do this, you have to do what's required of you.
I just would like to say your backgrounds today, guys, very strong. Not so strong, Doug Von Oist, coming up very short here in his absence. You more than amply made up for it, but still very, very, very weak on the part of the oyster. Anyway, gentlemen, as always, it is always good to see you, and I'd love it if we were just around the same table, but hopefully sooner than later. Talk to you guys soon.
Demand that we come in.
You.
Yeah. Oh, I've been double shot myself. We got to figure it out.
Thanks a million, Rich. Be well.
You too, guys. All right, everyone. We're going to be right back to wrap things up.